everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I am your host as always. Hope you're all keeping well. And I am keeping well because I've got a very special guest lined up for this week's extra, and that is the ever wonderful Caroline Morrison. Caroline, thank you so much for joining me on Extra this week.
No, thank you, Cammy, for inviting me. It's been far too long since you and I have been on a pod, so looking forward to this.
Yes, absolutely. And do you know what, Caroline? I'm actually getting a little bit excited now. I didn't think I would be because the season kicked off last week, obviously. Disappointing 0-0 at Tynecastle. But then we got the uplift of a last-minute equaliser across in Poland against Dynamo Kiev in our Champions League qualifier. And we begin our season at home, kind of, against Motherwell at Hampden tomorrow afternoon. And yeah, I'm starting to get a bit excited for that. I do think that Cyril Dessers equaliser has helped lift my mood somewhat. So how are you feeling about it all and our home away from home that we're having to go to?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm very similar to yourself, Cammy. I was really lucky in the Miders draw to get a ticket for Tynecastle because my luck normally extends to maybe a St Johnstone ticket. That's about it of the season. So to get the opener when it's so few tickets was mind-blowing to me. But anyway, I went across to Edinburgh with Marina. Disappointed, obviously, in the result and the performance, so wasn't expecting much ahead of the Kiev game. But like you say, that last-minute winner, of course, is always fantastic, but especially in those circumstances where we knew that was going to be a really tough leg. We probably... we feared a much tougher game than it actually transpired to be. And, you know, thinking about what now we stand to gain when we come back to Hampden, as it will be next week, things are looking quite positive. And I just hope that tomorrow we can keep this momentum going. There's still lots of things that aren't quite falling into place yet, or things that are still problem areas, but it's just about that picking up momentum. It's always a bit the same at the start of the season. We never really start amazingly. So let's just hope that will kickstart something in the team and build that confidence that we need.
Yeah, and I think, listen, do you know what? It's funny because now that I've had time to kind of reflect on it since last week's draw at Tynecastle, which, by the way, I'm now blaming on you and Marina, I do think that it's interesting that we were gutted, but I think a part of that is also because it's the league opener. Do you know what I mean? Like, we want to start brightly and we weren't able to do so. And yet, at any other point in the season, you know, once you're kind of well into it and stuff, a draw at Tynecastle probably wouldn't have hurt as much. But I think there was a lot of context around, you know, we were keen to see a new team. We didn't get that because obviously injuries and players coming in that have still to settle. We'll talk about that obviously in a little bit. But I suppose it's kind of calmed me down a little bit. And then that coupled, as I say, with what I thought was a good result across in Poland. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm happy that we managed to get a last-minute equaliser against a team that, all intents and purposes, I think if you were to play further down the season, if it was in a Europa League game, for example, you might have been a wee bit disappointed with it. But I think everyone had to accept it was a makeshift team. The front three, I think, you know, had some real worries about. But we were able to get a result, and we've turned it from what we thought could be a worst-case scenario and potentially out of the tie, which I was really thinking at half-time, to being able to come into Hampden next Tuesday's favourites. And I suppose, like I say, it's given me a bit of that kind of upward trajectory. And this is the thing, though, is because it's all in the moment, and the whole fan base, I think, just needed a little bit of something to kind of get behind, because it's felt like a long summer. It's felt like as if it has had a lot of transition. We've had, you know, some concerns around finances. We haven't been able to get all of the targets that we wanted to secure. But some good news, which I think helped in terms of being able to get that draw. And now, again, without sounding too entitled, I think that this gives Rangers an opportunity to continue with that kind of upward trend with a good result against Motherwell tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I think for me with Tynecastle last weekend, I was more not surprised at the performance. You quite rightly say there that that's a difficult away ground to go to, and there's no shame in dropping points there. It was just, though, I didn't think the manner of our performance was what I was hoping for that first game of the season, and especially because that last friendly against Berlin, I thought going forward we looked quite positive and we played some really nice football at times. Going forward again defensively, we were quite rocky. So I just thought we didn't see as much of that as you'd want against Hearts. So that was the most disappointing part for me. And yeah, I think it was better on or in Poland. So that's all that you want to see, just that progression. And you're right, I think we've still got a lot of business still to do. Lots of people still going to go out the door. Hopefully that frees up some much needed funds to bring people in. I think that injection of fresh blood, fresh ideas will be really important this season, because we need to not be quite so predictable. Hearts is one of those slightly more open games where you will have the opportunity to counter, but when we play against that low block, as it's called, it will be really tricky. And I think as many kind of fresh attacking players and different ways that we can try to break a team down like that is going to be so needed to get through a slog of a season like that we usually have in the FPFL.
Yeah, and earlier on today, the manager had his press conference, but we also got a little bit of a look at Robin Proper as well. And I think, Caroline, we were expecting Proper to probably play before now. He came in because we were able to free up some money thanks to the Connor Goldson departure. My hope is that he features at Hampden tomorrow, but he did make mention of the fact that it's going to take him time to be able to try and settle in. And it was interesting because the manager made reference to Jefte and how it's taken him a bit of time to settle in. And something that I think is really interesting is that maybe sometimes we do forget or unintentionally dismiss, I suppose, the younger players. Jeffy's only 20, and so it's going to take time to be able to try and get him to come in and just get used to the team, get used to his new surroundings. It's a difficult thing for footballers to be able to try and do straight out of the gate. And there was probably a real desire for us to be able to hit the ground running and get players in as quickly as we possibly could. It hasn't been possible because of the various things that you kind of touched on there. Proper to me looks like as if he's going to come in with obvious leadership capabilities, having been the captain at 20. But he looks like as if he's very keen to be able to try and get started. He did all of the pre-season with 20. He was taking part in that. There's been this interruption to his play because he's obviously had to get the move settled. But I'm excited to see what he can do, because the game against Hearts that you mentioned there, and to a certain extent as well against Kiev, we just looked defensively disorganised. And I think he can bring in a degree of command. I think he can look at where he needs to be able to try and move players around him, be able to try and do that. And he'll want the ball as well. He won't be afraid to be able to have the ball at his feet and then look to see what he can do with it to start a forward move. I'm excited by him, and I'll be really, really curious to see the lineup tomorrow, to see whether or not he starts.
Yeah, I didn't manage to catch the proper section of the press conference, but I did catch Clement. So I don't know if the fact that he was there probably suggests that, of course he will feature tomorrow. But yeah, I don't know if you got the impression that he might start, Cammy. Is that a possibility, do you think?
That's tough to answer. The manager gives away very little in his presser comments. I think if he feels that he's ready in terms of, he feels comfortable with the setup and he feels comfortable with the guys around him, then I definitely think he'll give him an opportunity. And listen, the manager's never going to come round and say, I thought defensively we were poor or anything. He's never going to do that. No manager will, right? But he's not blind. He's going to see where there's frailties there and what he has to work with within that, within that sphere. So I think if Proper is fit to play and is up to playing in terms of, he feels like it could be something that wouldn't be a detriment to the team, is probably the best way I can put it. then I would struggle to find a reason as to why the manager wouldn't start him.
Yeah, I was hoping that would be the case. But nothing surprises me, and I although it frustrates us as fans, I actually admire the fact that Clement doesn't bow to pressure. Like, if he doesn't feel that someone's right or it's not the right time to introduce someone back from injury, he's pretty steadfast in that. Like, he won't be, like I say, succumbing to any pressure to play someone earlier than they're ready for. He's a bit, maybe a little overcautious, but, he knows far more than we do. So if Proper's ready and he started tomorrow, I'll be really excited to see him. Because you're right, I've not watched too much of him, of course, but I just get the impression that he will bring that sense of calm to the defence. He will help things be much more organised, and we need that. We definitely need that. I mean, Goldson, I know that he had his faults, but that's one thing that he did bring to the centre of defence was that organisation, and he would kind of instill a level of calm no matter who his partner was. So we need to replace that element that we've lost with Goldson. I think that's really important because I like elements of Souttar's play. I like lots of what Balogun does as well, but I don't think either of them are perfect at that. Balogun's slightly better, but I still think you need a proper, regular, weekly starting leader in that centre of defence, and I hope that will be Proper. I'm looking forward to seeing if it will be.
Something else which the manager kind of really briefly discussed today as well, Caroline, I'm keen to kind of get your thoughts on as well, was the impression that Jefte gave us in terms of playing slightly further forward. I thought he played very well against Kiev when he came on. I mean, obviously he was instrumental in the build-up to the goal as well with that kind of switch pass across to Czerny on the right-hand side. And he made mention that, that could be an option. And I'll be honest with you, based on the very, very small, sample size of which we've seen, I wouldn't be entirely against it. There is an argument which I know that people listening to this will say, well, he should play because really the only other option we have out there at the moment is Scott Wright, and Scott Wright carries, I think a lot of concern with the Rangers fans. I understand it. I think that sometimes it's a little bit OTT because Scott Wright is a capable player. He's never going to hit, the superstar, levels, and we know that. He may not be here come the beginning of September. But I do like this idea of at least we have another option, because for far too long in several positions of the team, we've struggled to be able to try and come up with an alternate option. So Jefte, for me, I think it could be interesting to see if he features where the manager feels he could best utilise him. I don't think Ridvan Yilmaz had a great game on Tuesday night. So I wouldn't necessarily drop Yilmaz, because actually I would give Yilmaz the start against Motherwell, because we know he can play better and he'll probably want to get a good result under his belt, because I'm sure he'll feel that he didn't play particularly brilliantly either. But that could be a really interesting combination on that left-hand side. Again, we take that with a pinch of salt because, Jefte, he's not going to be able to play, I think, the full 90 minutes. I could be wrong, but I think we'll still see Scott Wright feature at some stage, where or not we do the same thing, where Wright starts, comes off at half-time, and then Jefte comes in. Obviously, we'll have to see how the game is progressing at that point. But, again, it could be interesting to see as to how the manager goes with him.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I did think in the press conference today, that Clement spoke more candidly about than I would expect from him. So he was asked the question about whether he bought Jefte with the possibility of playing him further forward in the field. And he did say he knew that that was something he might do, but he hadn't planned on actually having to do that so soon. And he basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but said, if other players aren't able to play, and he didn't kind of specify through injury or through kind of not performing, that's an option that he has and he knew he would have. So I thought he was really kind of candid there, and I think he was, it was quite pointed really, to say that if you're not performing, if you're not good enough, there is quality that can come in. And with Jefte, I wasn't too, in the earlier kind of pre-season games, I wasn't blown away, but then we'd also been told by Clement, he is a development player. He is someone that's going to take some time to settle. He might not be a kind of an instant starter. So then to see him come off the bench and perform like I think he did midweek, which was excellent. I think he gave us so much going forward. His crosses and the accuracy of them I thought was fantastic. And it really helped liven up that second half. And then, of course, him playing that instrumental role in what would be the equalising goal. He's got to feature tomorrow. And like you say, he might not quite be there to play a full 90 minutes, but I wouldn't mind seeing the reversal of what we saw at the weekend, where he starts and then we might see Wright come on to replace him, and hopefully the game might be done and dusted. I don't know if that's too much to hope for, Cammy, but that's what I'm wishing for.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we could have as easy a game on Saturday afternoon, the better. I spoke to Greg Marshall, Rangers SLO, on Friday's update on our Patreon network, Caroline, and he'd obviously mentioned that with the first, home game being at Hampden and the various rigmarole that's happened as a result of all of this nonsense with the stadium, we're keen to be able to try and get supporters to the ground as early as possible in order to be able to try and help access. But it does allow another part to this, which I think is going to be pretty instrumental in terms of how it's going to feel as a home game, a home away from home game, which, again, like you say, no one wants, but we are in this situation. There's not much that we can do with it. But all that being said and done, what will be interesting to me, we'll see. I think that we'll have a turbulent opening period as the fans kind of settle in and we start to kind of get into the game and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll be honest with you, I think if the team can start brightly and they start positively with again, like you say, I start to put our stamp on the game, I genuinely think that the fans will absolutely get behind them no matter, the fact that they're in this reallocated position.
Yeah, and I forgot to answer this when you asked it earlier, but I too am also looking forward to going to Hampden now, and I was really dreading the thought of it. And even now, the thought of kind of 4 consecutive games being at Hampden doesn't fill me with a whole lot of joy, because I just think Hampden's a bit of a pain to get to be honest. Even though, I'm not terribly far from Hampden, it's still a pain just compared to how easy I think and accessible Ibrox is. But it's the position we find ourselves in. There is good reason for it. I mean, the circumstances with things getting delayed is frustrating, but we find ourselves in this now and we've got to make the most of it. And we've got to try and, although it's not a home game like we know it, we have to try and make that home advantage count somehow. So it is good that Greg came and kind of explained to fans how important it would be to get there early. I agree that I don't think the initial email was totally clear, if I'm honest, because I think it was in smaller print where it said that you could use the QR code. So I know some people were kind of questioning whether they'd have to print their tickets. I think it's really cleared up now. Another benefit of people getting along early will be just getting to see those faces you haven't seen in a long time. So it looks as though we have kind of been placed around Hampden in roughly the same sections that you have at Ibrox. So I love that about the first home game of the season, where you do get to see the people that you don't know incredibly well, the people whose phone numbers you don't have, but that you do speak to every week when you go to the games. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is seeing people having that first home game of the season kind of atmosphere, even though it's at Hampden. And I just hope, the performance follows suit. It should do. And let's wait and see if that's the case.
Yeah, well, I hope so. But then again, the players are going to have to take the responsibility for that, because they're going to have to give us something to be able to try and shout about. Keen to get your thoughts on the way how the team will take kind of shape as well, Caroline. And I think, there's been various talk. The manager didn't allude to any of this, by the way, so it's, I think, all just kind of rumours about whether or not we might see Danilo tomorrow. We know that he has been building himself back up to match fitness following his injury, which obviously pretty much wrote off last season. It is important that he's able to try and get back into that, because, again, we'll talk about Cyril Dessers in just a moment, but I'm really keen to be able to see him get back involved, because apart from an alternate option, and we absolutely need one, I'm just keen for him to be able to kind of restart his career at Rangers. That injury was, a hell of a blow And, we've seen him already. I was at the Manchester United friendly at Murrayfield. You can tell that he's just off the pace slightly. Totally expect that, because we wouldn't have allowed him to get back into proper training until we could have made sure that there wouldn't have been a flare-up or any other issues. And again, I want to be able to try and just see him offer something a little bit different if he can, but it's always with that caveat at the moment in terms of, we do realise this now, he'll have limitations until he gets back up to his proper level. But for me, I think if we could make tomorrow's game as straightforward as possible, and we can allow him the opportunity to come on if we've got, a couple of goal advantage, just to make sure that he comes in and he gets into the pace of it. There's huge benefits from here, just being able to try and put the game to bed early, and that's absolutely one of them.
Yeah, poor Danilo really has had a tough time of it with his injury since he's come here. So I think it's probably right that he's been very carefully reintroduced. Again, we're impatient. I was really impatient. I was hoping to see far more minutes from him than we have up until now. But given how serious his injury was, and it was the second, spell that he had out, it's the right thing to do, to be a bit cautious. And we kind of see with Cortez is another one who had a bad injury, and then he's not long back where he kind of suffers something again, and looking back, maybe he shouldn't have come out the second half at Tynecastle. But hindsight's wonderful, isn't it? But I think it is a reminder that if you don't need to put that pressure on someone when they're returning or when they feel a slight niggle, then we shouldn't. And we should have enough strength in the squad, even though we haven't completed our business yet, to still get the job done. So yeah, I don't think there'll be a huge difference from the starting lineup that we saw on Tuesday. But what is nice is that I think that we can bring in Sterling, for example. I think that he, of course, is still coming back, but again, similar to what we said with Proper, you might want to utilise him from the start, and then when he's starting to tire, maybe bring him off later in the game. Because it's quite an intense week for the players that we are going to be asking to start all 3 matches. So where you can, like with Sterling, rotate and kind of rest some kind of key players, I think that would be really useful. Also with Tav, I know that Tav's a really difficult player to talk about because there's so much speculation that he might still be on his way out. But for the moment, he's playing, he's our captain. And I think we're seeing improvements with him. I think he had some frustrating performances, earlier in kind of friendlies and whatnot. But I must say I'm seeing an improvement week by week, and I wonder if he was playing with an injury for part of what we saw last season and whether there's still improvements to be made. I do still worry though that, the age that he is at and what we demand of him in terms of minutes played, whether or not that's something that he can actually do this season. I wouldn't like to see us rely on him so heavily. But while he's here, he is so important, and I think that if he's continuing to improve like we're seeing, then I think he'll be incredibly important at the weekend too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a given that Tav is end up going to start right back again, which not a huge amount of the fans I've spoken to were overly comfortable with. He's just, I don't think he's at full fitness either. I think that, we know that he had those injury concerns that you mentioned. He just plays, and it was certainly evident at Tynecastle with a slightly better game against Kiev, but he just looks like a player who struggles somewhat to be able to try and assert himself. And it's difficult because, he has carried the team at times. He has been Mr. Reliable, and he has come up in the moments that we've needed him to. Again, you come back to that idea as to whether or not Proper could take some of that burden off of him to help, with the defensive shape and what have you. But it has been a challenge to watch us see a guy who we know doesn't lack any heart whatsoever. It's just that, he has got older. He is trying to get back to the level that he was in terms of his overall fitness. But right now, it's challenging to be able to try and watch him.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of taking those glimmers, those improvements, and hoping that that's, like you say, a trajectory that Tav's on, and we can see him go back to being, a big contributor in this team. it might not transpire that way, but I'm hopeful that will be the case. And I think in terms of the rest of the team, yeah, Danilo, I'd love to see him get lots more minutes, because Dessers, he's come under a lot of stick, and actually it was really lovely this week, hearing him talking about the fans, and he recognises that, some fans are going to be really critical of him, but, he still, from the majority of fans, gets a lot of support, and he's trying hard. And hearing Clement talk about as well how much he's developed over the last year. And sometimes I think for all the frustrations we might have with Dessers, we probably need to take a step back and go, we really have asked an awful lot of him, and some of the other forward players really haven't been assisting in the way that they should, and a lot has been kind of placed on Dessers' shoulders in terms of what's expected and delivering goals. So I'm looking forward to being able to see Dessers where he can play in a team where not all the pressure is put on him to deliver the goals. And I think Danilo will be a perfect addition to come in and hopefully offer us something different and chip in with the goals that we're definitely going to need.
And I mean, Cyril Dessers, you're right. It's one of those things, and I know it's been a constant conversation throughout the majority of last season, but also what we saw in terms of he's back to the starting lineup again. It feels very much like the same. I do believe that Rangers will obviously assess that in terms of what they can bring in for striking options, because it's absolutely a priority in my book. But I think you also have to give Cyril Dessers a lot of credit. Again, coming back to the press conference today, he was one of the guys that Robin Proper spoke to about being able to come over to Rangers, and he said, it's a great place to be able to try and play football. And, for Dessers and his journey, I think that, it would be fair for us to be able to make sure that we give him a fair crack of the whip this season, because even if we do bring in another striker, we're still going to have to rely on Cyril Dessers at some stage. It's just going to happen. There has obviously been talk about him potentially linked with moves outside of Rangers. I don't know if that will be the case, because it feels like as if we get rid of a striker, we're now going to have to buy two, because we certainly need one. I think, for me, what I'd love is to be able to see and hear a little bit more is just a little bit more patience with Dessers, because we saw across in Poland, he did have chances. He is always going to struggle to be that first-time finisher. It's just not a natural part of his game. He's not the last. He's not the first Rangers striker to have said issues, and he won't be the last. But you can't fault, for me, Caroline, his attitude and his application. I'd love us to be able to try and see if we can give him some more concerted coaching on his finishing. Maybe that's happening, I don't know, because we saw an upturn in his overall fitness levels and mobility after Clement came in. But if we can start to improve that side of his game in this period where we absolutely have to rely on him, I'm fairly sure that the fans will get behind him. And to a certain extent, we're just accommodating now, I think. We are more patient with him now, because Tuesday night showed us that, and again, like I say, he has done it before, that even if he does miss those chances, his attitude is bang on, because he just doesn't let his head go down and fade out of the game. He will keep working. And I was delighted for him when that goal went in against Kiev, because you want him scoring now. You want him to be able to try and have that confidence boost, and certainly a few goals, if possible, against Motherwell will do nothing but continue to move that in the right direction.
Yeah, and also us bringing in that other creative players will certainly help. We saw with Jefte and with Czerny being added to the side how they're able to offer something a little bit different, where you can have a forward like Dessers who has particular strengths, capitalise on working with them. What Dessers doesn't do well is kind of when he's got too much time, basically. He's not great, I don't think, at hold-up play, and I think that when he does need to kind of run with the ball or move into space, he's not particularly great. Also, I think he takes far too many touches, which is really frustrating, that you say. If he was able to kind of have the confidence and the incisiveness just to kind of take a shot first or second time, I think his success rate would be so much better. But that's where you're bringing in other players that can help complement the type of striker that he is, and if we kind of can use these new additions to better suit what he's going to need, then until we can bring in other players like Danilo, and perhaps another one coming in, and of course Igamani, then I think we have to try and accommodate what Dessers needs.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that, when you, I mean, I'm not going to say that there's a link-up play just there yet because it's too early to say so, but, when you saw the ball in from Chen, he knew exactly where to be able to put it, and he had to be able to get onto the end of it, which I thought was great striking play. I spoke to obviously a few people at the time saying, if that's a Kamar Roof finish, everybody's saying, well, that's just naturally what Kamar Roof does. He knows to get into the right place at the right time, and Dessers has done that. Now, if that, as I say, is a segue into him being able to just sharpen up that part of his game, then we'll do nothing but benefit from it. Give me a little bit of your thoughts, Caroline, just as we kind of wrap up as we look forward to tomorrow, about your thoughts on Černý. Did you like what you saw from him? The manager has again said that he's only had, I think at the moment just now, about 6 training sessions, so he's not ready for the full 90 minutes. But again, if we get into a comfortable space against Motherwell, fingers crossed, we may see him involved, and some more match sharpness coming from him. I like the look of him personally. I think that he's definitely got a footballing brain in there. You can tell he's vastly experienced. I think it could be an option, and finally one that we've been able to hopefully solve for the right-hand side.
Yeah, I would agree. And seeing him at Tynecastle, I thought that he was definitely looking for the ball, and to come off the bench like he did when we're in that position where we're desperately looking for a winning goal. I liked that he didn't shy away from that. He was, although it wasn't coming off for him, he was trying, and I really admired that for his first kind of showing in a difficult game. And then, of course, midweek there, what he was able to do was fantastic, and something that we were definitely lacking, and especially because I think the Kiev players had kind of thought, this guy's going out towards the kind of far side of the pitch. There's not much space. There's not much that he can do. There's no danger here. I think they underestimated the quality of the pass and the space he was able to find. So that was really impressive. And you're right, I don't mean to talk down Dessers. I probably was a bit harsh there, because what Dessers did do was be really alert to the situation and get himself in that little bit of space that was enough. And so the two of them together, I think, is something that could be quite exciting. Not trying to put too much pressure on them right now, because we've seen so little, of course, of Černý, but it would be nice to think that that's something that could blossom there.
Yeah, absolutely would. And then just before, as I say, we wrap up, another part of the team that we haven't really discussed yet, but keen to get your thoughts on it, because as you said earlier on, we pod far too infrequently. But really liking the partnership of Connor Barron and Mohamed Diomande in the middle. Barron, looks as if he's settling in really, really well. I love his energy. He's going to start off his domestic campaign as a Rangers player in a league which he knows, but not a league that he knows in as a Rangers player. And I think that that's going to be a key difference. Thought he did well in spells against Hearts, but having seen him a few times now in the pre-season friendlies and obviously in the competitive games, I like the look of it. Diomande, for me, a player that never hides, wants the ball in close quarters, is keen and capable of taking the ball and looking to be able to try and produce something from it. I think we've had some chat that maybe the ideal 3 that we can go with is those 2 and Dijon Sterling. But right now, that Diomande-Barron partnership, I'm really excited about. I'm really keen to see what it can do tomorrow. Yeah,
Barron's been kind of pick of the bunch, really, in all the games we've seen so far. He absolutely never shies away. I think he's really dogged as well. He's just works incredibly hard. Diomande as well. I think they complement each other quite well, because I'm not quite sure that Diamande's quite adjusted to the pace of Scottish football and how little time he's going to have on the ball, and sometimes the battle that he's going to have in midfield. Diomande, though, is also one of those players where he's the most impressive to watch. When Diomande is good, he's really good. So I think the two of them together is a great compliment to one another. And you're right, with Sterling potentially coming into that midfield, I really like the sound of that midfield three. So yeah, Barron, I think I underestimated him. I didn't expect that he would come in and feature as much as he has already. But he truly has pretty much nailed that position in the middle of the park so far. And good for him. I'm absolutely delighted for him.
Yep, absolutely. And as I say, a really good opportunity to see what else he can do against Motherwell tomorrow at Hampden as well. So, yes, we go to Mount Florida looking for 3 points. A sentence I never thought I'd say, Caroline. But again, I'm really excited for it. Thank you so much for coming on to this week's Extra. You've definitely lifted my mood even further.
Good, no, it's been really lovely to chat to you, Cammy. And I've had a wee look at the weather. It does look like it's going to be pretty sunny tomorrow. So what more can you ask for?
Well, 3 points would be nice, and to also come out of the game injury free would be nice as well. Just before we go, folks, just a couple of quick bits of housekeeping for us. Thank you to our show sponsors, NordVPN. If you would like to be able to take advantage of a fantastic offer that we have on with Nord, please jump on to nordvpn.com/heart and hand. That will give you a discount on some of the NordVPN plans. It's not just about being able to change over your VPNs depending where you are. There's loads of security benefits in there as well, which is really important in today's times. You can also get it back with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Also, thank you to our executive producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. David will be back with you with Flagship next week. Might be slightly rearranged in terms of times than what you're used to, because obviously the game's on a Tuesday at the moment. We want to be able to try and encapsulate all of them as well, and I'll be back next week with Extra. Caroline, thank you so much for coming on. And you know, and I know, that if anyone wants to be able to hear more from us, they can jump onto our Patreon site, patreon.com/heart and hand, where you'll have some great stuff on there and all your insight as well, with some great shows that you do there too, especially Blue Scarves On with our friend Marina.
Yeah, thanks again, Cammy. Really lovely to chat to you.
Thanks for listening, folks. We'll speak to you all again next week. Bye-bye now.